Joining us is the inventor of the Hollywood Stock Exchange virtual trading system used on many markets around the world, a top broker in his own right, radio host, TV host, author, Max Keiser of MaxKeiser.com, joins us every week or so now because he's just been so spot on, like Gerald Celente and others. Another reason to buy gold, Swiss losing safety status, CNBC, markets are down 138 points, the Dow is. Right now, are 1.23%. Everything is going according to plan, like we told you 3 years ago. They'd have QE1, QE2, things would only get worse, and it's only really deepening the crisis we're entering. Instead of writing off the tens of thousands of trillions of different types of derivatives, all the garbage, instead of just getting rid of that, instead of getting rid of the Ponzi scheme, the whole world must be fed into the wood chipper. And joining us to talk about the big developments, what this Swiss lowering the franc by 9%, saying they're going to buy currencies to keep it low, to try to hide the fact that currencies worldwide are devaluing. What is this all about? What's happening with the euro? What's happening with the dollar? What's the next shoe to drop? Max Keiser, because you got attacked, I got attacked, many others did, for saying that things were in a depression and only going to get worse. Now it's evident we were right. So where is this going now, Max Keiser?
Well, of course, we were attacked because there's a war. There's a war on, and you have to expect that you're going to be attacked. And for the people on the other side who are saying that I'm causing some of these problems, I would expect to hear that from my enemy, the other side of this war. So this is to be expected as the war heats up. Now, in terms of Switzerland, Switzerland in the last few years has really gone completely against everything that people associated with Switzerland. First, they abandoned the gold standard. They sold a lot of their gold. The Swiss central bank sold tons and tons of gold a few years ago. Then they allowed U.S. tax authorities to open up the accounts of United Bank of Switzerland, UBS, to foreign interests, which goes against the law in Switzerland. They allowed the U.S. to act extrajudicially, to go into their own system and to probe accounts. Now today, they're saying they're going to peg the Swiss franc to the euro. In effect, anytime the Swiss franc gets to 120 to the euro, they're going to open the spigots and print Swiss francs infinitely, ad infinitum, which of course is going to cause massive inflation, which only benefits the people printing the money. Of course, the central global bankers once again. So Switzerland has fallen. Switzerland has fallen to the global banking cartel. And now I wouldn't be surprised if you see some, a gathering in some square in Zurich of the local Swiss people that are being screwed, like we've seen in Athens and Cairo, in Wisconsin, in Madrid, in all over the world. It's the global insurrection against banker occupation. Now it's hit Switzerland.
Now, please continue, Max.
Well, let me just bring something up, which I talked to Jaron about it a little bit, getting into this Ron Paul situation. Not only we have the voting machines that are rigged, we know this from previous elections, and not only do you have the polls that are rigged, and not only do you have the mainstream media that's rigged, but these so-called prediction markets are also rigged. I'm looking at the biggest one right now. It's called intrade.com. And they have Ron Paul winning president contract up there at 3%. Now, this obviously doesn't reflect the current market. And the reason you get to a 3% probability is through market manipulation. And as you know, when you introduced me, I invented prediction markets. I invented virtual markets. And Intrade is a ripoff of the Hollywood Stock Exchange that came along. And a couple of the people that I used to work with started Intrade, and I've written about how they manipulate markets and how dangerous it is when you are manipulating political markets. Every time you head into these elections, you have big news stories quoting the probability on Intrade. But the Intrade probability numbers are manipulated. And you can see it right now with the Ron Paul contract. They have them at 3%. That's a manipulated number. Your listeners can go on to Intrade right now. It's a virtual market they use pretend money. It's not real money. and they can play the in-trade market, and they can get his probability up higher. And in so doing, the media would be forced to report on that and to report on the fact that Ron Paul is now skyrocketing on the in-trade political prediction market. They can also sell short those other two characters, Rick Perry and Mitt Romney. You can sell those two guys short on in-trade and drive their probability down. So in other words, I've always said, Alex, you've got to fight fire with fire. They use their platforms and counterfeit money and counterfeit media to present a counterfeit reality. To counteract that, we have to go into the lion's den, go onto an in-trade market, get Ron Paul up to a 50, 60% probability of winning, then Time will have to report that. Newsweek will have to report that. Drudge Report will have to report that, as they've done in the last 3 presidential cycles. Because it's a market, therefore it must be right. That's part of the market fundamentals of America. This is America's theocracy is based on worshiping market results. So if the market says it's what it is, then that must be with its direct word from God, the market God. So,
but the problem is the system, the controllers are in there manipulating the market, and so creating a fraud. That's why they can say, well, it doesn't matter if he's winning on the internet. Ron Paul still can't win. Well, it doesn't matter if he's winning now in scientific polls. We still say he can't win. But more and more, they're losing control. And the next issue I wanted to raise, speaking of alternative media becoming the new media, as you know, the Drudge Report really led with our articles last year exposing Big Sis's lies. We've got a new big report coming out very soon by Paul Joseph Watson on this. But here's the headline. Janet Napolitano, Drudge is just wrong on privacy. Well, no, it's Big Sis that's wrong. And she's like, how dare him put up photos of me where I look like an ogre? He's using real photos of her. How dare him run all these stories criticizing me? Well, most of those stories, especially last year, were our articles. This shows it's getting to the system that people aren't buying their lies anymore. So as we get to this crisis of credibility, where does it go from here with the establishment?
Well, just a quick little follow-up. Just as you use the Google bombs to get stories listed on Google and therefore on mainstream media, I'm suggesting doing an in-trade prediction market bomb to make Ron Paul the leader on that market and to get his name as winning all other candidates. It'll have to be picked mainstream media. The problem, it's a solution. But
okay, your Skype's breaking up a bit. Your Skype's breaking up a bit, but just to be clear, you sent me a link, intrade.com, and it's got a link to 2012 presidential election winner, individual open to suggestion. How does an Intrade, the prediction market site, work? And so explain to, I mean, we have a lot of stock traders and others listening, but for the general public, how this works and what this does and what this means.
Well, it's based on the technology that I invented. The virtual specialist technology. When you introduced me, you mentioned it every time. The virtual specialist technology, patent number 159176, the Keiser patent. You're able to take in a virtual currency market all the collective bids and offers or buys and sells and generate a price. Now, I designed this technology as a way to defeat manipulation. Unfortunately, it has fallen into the hands of Wall Street banks. The technology is now owned by Cantor Fitzgerald. And people like Intrade who use this technology to use that platform to manipulate results. So the 3% probability of Ron Paul winning is a manipulated result. And I'm telling you, as the inventor of the technology, the way to overthrow their manipulation is to do a Google bomb type Intrade attack to get masses of people to buy Ron Paul to presidential winner in 2012. And when he becomes higher than the other candidates on that site, it has to be reported by the news. Every single
Max, I understand that. Max, this is too important, and I want to get into some other issues. You're joining us via video Skype, but we're going to just go to audio Skype with you here for a moment and come back to you because we're getting a bit more choppiness than we normally do when you join us from Paris where you live. But very interesting idea that you have there. I want to get into gold and silver and the fact that gold went up, I don't know, 60-something bucks today, then they drove it back down. But regardless, you look at the 12-year graph, it's going straight up. Short term, where is gold going? Where are the other markets going? And where does this train end? On the current trajectory of the world financial markets, with the men doing God's work, like Lloyd Blankfein. Where does this insanity end, Max Keiser?
Well, if you'll indulge me 1 second here, if I can just take one other little digression. We've been talking about Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and all these banksters and how they've been interfering with markets and keeping prices like gold suppressed. I wanted to remind you of a story that came out last year about the Teamsters. You know, Goldman Sachs had invested some of the pension funds of the Teamsters, and they put their money into a fraudulent derivatives-based product that lost 60% of the value very quickly. What the Teamsters did was they went down to Goldman Sachs' office, and they said, either you give us your money back or we're going to break your legs. And guess what? Goldman Sachs gave the money back. The reason I bring this up is because it's foolish to think that when you're dealing with a gangster like Goldman Sachs, a terrorist like Goldman Sachs, that you're going to appease them by talking them into doing the right thing or be acting in a moral way. They only understand one language, and that is intimidation. That's the only language they understand. And America has had their money stolen, trillions of dollars, and therefore it's incumbent upon Americans to seek redress. And since the courts won't help them, and since there's nobody to help them, they have to do what the Teamsters did. Go down to their office and get your money back and intimidate them. It's a great story. It's on Google. You can do a search for it. I have it on my website. It's how the Teamsters beat Goldman Sachs. And I think that's a blueprint for the future. Now, to answer your question on the gold, where is it going? Obviously, gold is going much higher because it's the only currency in the world without what's called counterparty risk. It is what it is. You don't need, like a derivative contract, two parties trading with each other to create the value in between those two parties. Gold has a value unto itself. It has intrinsic value. And that's why it's always been viewed as a reliable currency for thousands of years. Now, during the post-fiat currency era of 1971 going forward, when Nixon went off the gold standard, essentially, we went into a period believing that fiat money could replace gold. And the average lifespan of fiat money, I just learned this myself, is 27 years. Now, the dollar has been around for 40 years as a fiat currency. You have to think of it in those terms. The U.S. dollar has only been around for 40 years in its life as a fiat currency.
Yeah, it's been a Federal Reserve note completely for at least 40 years, so it's only dollar in name only. It is a true, absolute fraud, and so 40 years is very long in the tooth for a fiat currency. I've done my own history. You're right. They rarely last past 30 years. Very long in the tooth. So we're coming to the end of an age. The bankers are saying, hey, Bank of the World, you pay your carbon taxes, your VAT to us. We rule you. We've bought all the armies with fiat dollars. How's that sound? Will the armies and the bureaucrats follow them straight into Hades, or will they wake up and start bringing these criminals to justice?
Well, all the banks are consolidating. So the two biggest bankrupt banks in Greece have just merged. The stocks went up 30% that day. Now they're hitting new all-time lows. The two biggest banks in France, Societe Generale and BNP, they're now talking about merging. Bank of America, which of course is one of America's biggest banks, they just got a $5 billion injection from Warren Buffett. They're now talking about going bankrupt, but instead they'll merge with some other entity like a Citibank or a JP Morgan. So all these global banks, the too big to fail banks, are becoming even bigger. They're merging again, another huge round of mergers as a way to consolidate power in those very few bankers. So the trend toward this global superstructure of bankers who control everything underneath is well underway. And what we sacrifice, what the people of Greece sacrifice, the people of Ireland sacrifice, Egypt, Tunis, is sovereignty. That's what we have to give in return.
Exactly. The people that engineered the fraud, it was in the news 2 weeks ago, EU dictatorship, financial council to rule. Who is that council? The big mega bank heads. I mean, it's incredible that they've gotten away with it this far. And so what I'm getting from you, Max, is it just continues forever with them publicly robbing us, stealing everything, with armed forces doing it because they're bald-headed and wear suits. And everybody knows old bald-headed men can't hurt you. And so we've got to let them rule us. We've got to give our entire future to them. Because they're now God of this planet.